evening, students. How are you all? Fine. Very good. Very good. Okay, the strength is less. I can see that the number of people here are less. Hopefully, the others will also join, I expect. Okay. So, we can start the session. So, the last class we started our theory classes, and the first lesson that we studied was sentences. What are sentences? Or what is generally meant by a sentence? Okay, so once we have completed sentences, we generally move to parts of
Adekam sir, can
speech.
switch off your mic, Adekam sir?
Yeah. Okay, thank you, thank you. So generally, if we complete sentences, when it comes to a school or college academic purpose, okay, generally after completing what are sentences or what are the types of sentences, we generally move to the parts of speech. Parts of speech are very important when it comes to English language. Okay, there are 8 parts of speech in English, and whether it is for written communication or verbal communication, parts of without parts of speech, it is impossible to create a conversation or to write or read something. Okay, so parts of speech is what makes a sentence meaningful, or it makes the language meaningful, like what we read and speak today. Okay, what we read, write, speak and listen, all these are composed of these 8 parts of speech. But instead of learning each part of speech, just like how the school students and college students learn, okay, since you are all working people, employ as being employees, I thought teaching each part of speech is not necessary now. Okay, so you can just note down the parts of speech. That is nothing. There is nothing wrong in that. Okay, but we will be mainly focusing on the important parts of speech that will help you to initiate a conversation. Out of 8 parts of speech, we have 4 to 5 parts which are very important in initiating a conversation. Okay, so we shall focus on those parts of speech so that it will be helpful for you to start speaking with correct parts of speech like nouns, verbs, adjectives, likewise. Okay, so I will just share a screen where you can look at the parts of speech. Just a minute. Okay, so first you have to know the names of those parts. So parts are generally of 8 types. It's not opening. Just a minute. Please give me a moment. Or you can start writing. Okay, the first one is called nouns. N-O-U-N-S. Till the screen is presented, you can start writing. Just you can write a heading as parts of speech. Okay. And the first one is called nouns. N-O-U-N-S. Nouns. Okay, is my screen visible? Is the screen visible? I will zoom it. Okay, so here it is given in the order: verb, noun, adverb, adjective, pronoun, preposition, conjunction and interjection. But instead of writing in this order, I recommend you to start with noun. Okay, so the first part of speech is noun. The next one is pronoun. After noun comes the pronoun, followed by verb. Verb comes in the third place, and then comes adjective. After verb comes adjective, then comes adverb, noun, pronoun, verb, adjective, adverb, and followed by preposition, conjunction and interjection. Those 3 can be written in the same order in which it is given. Okay, preposition, conjunction and interjection. So if you study in this order, I will be teaching you the parts of speech in this order only, so that if you follow this order, it will be easy for you to connect each and every part of speech with one another. Because if you learn noun, after learning noun, immediately you will be learning pronoun. So nouns and pronouns are each other connected. After that, verb is something that we will study today separately. Today we are not going to learn noun or pronoun. As I told you, we will learn nouns and pronouns in the later stage, because in academic curriculum we generally focus on the nouns first, and then we will move to pronouns, then verb, adjective, adverb, likewise. But I am not going to teach in an academic style. Rather, we are going to focus more on communication only. Okay, so first we shall study what is meant by verbs. After that, we will come to the other parts of speech. Because verb is a long part of speech because it has a lot of details to be learned in that. Okay, so once you have written this list, just go through. Okay, so there will be totally 8 parts of speech. Alright, so starting with noun, the second one is pronoun, the third one is verb, the fourth one is adjective, the fifth one is adverb. Adjectives and adverbs are connected to each other. Okay, like just like how nouns and pronouns are connected, adjectives and adverbs are connected. Also adverb is connected with verb, that we will learn later. And finally the last 3 are prepositions, conjunctions and interjections. Those 3 will be studied separately. Okay, fine. So now I am coming back to my previous presentation. Today we shall learn what are verbs. So you all must have heard this term verbs during your school or college days. Whatever course you had studied, okay, you would have heard what is meant by a verb. Verb is any kind of action. Any action that we perform in our day-to-day life is called a verb. For example, teaching. Teaching. I am currently doing an action called teaching. So teach is a verb. Similarly, you are listening to what I am teaching. So listen. Listen is a verb. Then reading, writing, speaking, cooking, walking, talking, eating, sleeping, all these actions are verbs. So whatever action we do in our life, all those actions are called verbs. So first let's discuss what are verbs. Verbs are words that indicate an action or state of being in a sentence. Okay, so verbs are words that indicate an action. Any action that is performed is called a verb. Or it can also indicate a state of being. State of being means it shows a condition. For example, conditions can be expressed in different tenses, either in present tense or past tense or future tense. Once we study verbs, once we complete learning verbs, the next topic is tenses. Okay, only after completing tenses we will come back to parts of speech. So I have decided to teach you in this order. Okay, in the last class you learned what is a sentence and what are the 4 types of sentences or 5 types of sentences including positive and negative sentences. Did you all write down the homework? Did you all try doing the homework that I gave in the last class to write different types of sentences? Did you all do it? Practice pannீங்களா? If no, please do it because I am not asking to do for me. Okay, it is not for me, rather it is to improve your knowledge. Okay, no need to share it to others or anything. Just take a book and do it. You can do it yourself. Okay, so that's the reason I had also shared the material for you in the group. Apart from the recording of the YouTube video, I had also shared the PDF of this notes separately so that you can have it in hand and practice doing the writing the different types of sentences. Okay, so if you have not done, please do it at least this week. Okay, so what is a verb? Verbs are words that indicate an action or state of being in a sentence. So a word is called a verb either if it is an action or it could be a state of being. State of being can be like she is sitting, he was walking, the girl is listening. So you are using the words like is, was, are, children are playing. So the small words like is, was, are, were, etc. These are all called helping verbs. Okay, so they are actually kuti verbs, small verbs. They are not action verbs. So verbs are basically of 2 types. One is main verb and the other one is helping verb. That you will learn after this. Okay, once we complete the main verb, we will learn what are helping verbs. So verbs can either indicate an action that is done by the main verb. Actions are always shown by the main verbs and state of being is always shown by the helping verb. States of being is always for helping verbs only. Only they can show the states, the conditions. Okay. A sentence remains incomplete without the presence of a verb in it. So you cannot write even a single sentence without a verb in it. Without a verb, it is impossible to write a sentence. It is not necessary that you should always use a main verb like walk, talk, eat, sing, dance. It is not like that. You should use always a main verb in a sentence. at least there must be a helping verb like is or was or am or are or were, etc. So at least there must be a helping verb in a sentence. If there is no verb at all, if there is no main verb or no helping verb, definitely the sentence will not be meaningful. So that's why I'm telling verb is a very important part of speech. We can form sentences without nouns. We can write sentences without pronouns. We can write sentences without adjectives or adverbs or prepositions or conjunctions or interjections. But it is not possible to write a sentence without a verb. So either you should use an action word or a helping verb. Okay. Now look at the following examples. Vani gave me a handbag. Disha loves flowers. The phone rang. The tiger is the national animal of India. Shweta is an artist. I have written a letter to my teacher. Okay. So here you can see in the first sentence, Vani gave me a handbag. Here, gave is an action that is performed. Gave. Gave means it is the past tense of give. Okay. So Vani gave me a handbag. So here gave is the past tense and it is an action word. Gave is an action word here. Similarly, Disha loves flowers. Loves is again it's an action word. Love, to love something or to like something, that is an action, right? Similarly, the phone rang. The phone rang. So rang is the past tense of ring. So if the phone rings, that will be in present tense. If the phone rang is in past tense. So rang is a verb. Next, the tiger is the national animal of India. Here you can see that there is no main verb. There is no main verb in this sentence. So what we can do, instead of a main verb, you can take is as the helping verb. Is a helping verb. Okay, so that is what I said. If there is no main verb in a sentence, definitely there will be at least a helping verb in the sentence. So is the verb here. Okay, next is Shweta is an artist. Again, similar to the fourth one, is the verb here. There is no other main verb. And finally, I have written a letter to my teacher. This sentence is interesting because you have two verbs in this sentence. One is a main verb and the other one is a helping verb. So you can see that have, the word have is a helping verb. There are 27 helping verbs in English. So when I start the topic helping verbs, you will come to know what are the helping verbs. So till that you can just understand these words. For example, is, am, are, was, were, has, have, had, do, does, did. These are all helping verbs. Got it? So have is a helping verb and written. Written is the main verb. It is the V3 form of write.
Sometimes your voice is breaking.
Is it
Excuse
breaking?
me, sometimes your voice is breaking.
Is it so? Okay. So I will check my
Uh,
connection. Okay. Yeah, sure, sure. Okay, okay. Thank you. Thank you. So here you can see I have written a letter to my teacher. So here have is a helping verb and written is the main verb. Written means it is the third form of the verb write. Write, wrote, written. Just like eat, ate, eaten. Likewise, write, wrote, written. Written is the third form of the verb. Every verb has three forms. V1, V2, V3. Okay. And written is the third form or the V3 form of the word write. Okay. So have is a helping verb and writing or written is the main verb here. This sentence has both the verbs, one helping verb and one main verb. So this is also possible. Some sentences will have both helping verbs and main verbs. Some sentences will have only helping verbs and some will have only main verbs. Clear? And auxiliary verb is nothing but the original name for helping verb. So if I tell you auxiliary, sometimes it is difficult for us to remember. So that is the reason I told you to use the word helping verb. Auxiliary means it is helping. The word that helps the main verb is called a helping verb or auxiliary verb. So now in this sentence you can see in the above sentences what are all the parts that we can observe. The first part is subject. Every sentence has a subject, right? For example, subject. What is meant by a subject? First you have to know that. Subjects are nothing but about whom or about what we are talking in a sentence. About whom or about what we are talking in a sentence. and it will be the subject that performs the action. In all sentences, there will be a subject. Every sentence will have one subject, at least one subject and one verb. And the subject will be the person or the thing that performs the action in the sentence. For example, Vani gave me a handbag. Here, Vani is the subject because I am talking about a girl named Vani. Similarly, Disha loves flowers. Here, Disha is the subject. The phone rang. So the phone, I'm talking about a thing or a substance called the phone. So the phone is the
Ma'am, we
subject.
can't hear you, ma'am.
Adekalam sir, can you hear me? Adekalam sir, can you please let me know whether you can hear me? Adekalam sir? Okay, we'll come back. Am I audible now? Am I audible now? Hello, am I audible now? Hello all, am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
You're
okay,
audible.
okay. Sorry, there was some error. Okay, so we shall continue. There was some network error. I don't know what happened. It was good till 4:30. I don't know what happened after that. Okay, so my screen is visible, right?
Yes, ma'am. It's visible.
Yes, yes. Okay, fine. Thank you. So here you can see that Vani is a subject because I am talking about Vani in the sentence. Similarly, Disha. Disha loves flowers. So Disha is the person about whom I am talking. So she is the subject or Disha is the subject. Next one is the phone rang. So I am talking about a substance called the phone. So the phone is the subject. The tiger is the national animal of India. So the tiger is the subject because I am talking about an animal called the tiger. Next is Shweta is an artist. So Shweta is again a subject. And finally, in the sixth one, I have written a letter to my teacher. Here you can see I is the subject because I am talking about myself, I. Okay. So first we have to understand what is meant by a subject in a sentence. Subject means about whom or about what we are talking about in a sentence. And it is the subject that will be performing the action in a sentence. Okay. Next is verb. After subject comes the verb. So here the verbs are gave, loves, rang, is and have written. These are the verbs. Okay. After subject and verb, next comes the object. Object is nothing but the part that comes after a verb in a sentence is called the object. For example, Vani gave me a handbag. Here, Vani is the subject, gave is the verb, me a handbag. This is the object. Me is a subject and a handbag is another subject. In the second sentence, Disha loves flowers. Here, flowers is the object. Object means it is not a thing. In grammar, object means something that comes after the verb. Something that comes after the verb in a sentence is called an object. Generally, object means a thing or porul. That is what we call understand object as. But in grammar, it is something different. Object means the part that comes after the verb in a sentence. First part is the subject, second part is the verb, and the third part is called the object. Sometimes there will be only one object in a sentence, and there are also cases where there can be more than one object in a sentence. For example, in the second sentence, Disha loves flowers. Flowers is only one object. Whereas in the first sentence, me is one object, a handbag is another object. Okay, so that we shall understand how to identify the two objects. Okay, the third one is the phone rang. Here you can see there is no object at all. There is only subject and verb here. The phone is the subject, rang is the verb. There is no object. So what can we understand from this? There can be sentences even without objects in English. So even if there is no object in a sentence, a sentence can be meaningful. It is not necessary that we should always write an object. Okay, it is not compulsory that we should always have an object in a sentence. There are cases where sentences can be written or formed even without an object. So the phone rang is a meaningful sentence even without an object. Clear? Next is the tiger is the national animal of India. Here the tiger is the subject, is the verb, the national animal of India is the object. The national animal of India, that is called the object. Then Shweta is an artist. Here an artist is the object. Shweta is the subject, is the verb, and an artist is the object. And finally, I have written a letter to my teacher. Here I is the subject, have written is the verb or two verbs, a letter to my teacher is the object. Here a letter is one object, to my teacher is another object. Here also we have two objects like the first one. Like in the first example, we have two objects. Okay, so how to identify whether there is one object or two objects? Okay, if there is only one object in a sentence, like Disha loves flowers or Shweta is an artist, if there is only one object in a sentence, that object is called direct object. What do we call it? Direct object. But if there are two objects in a sentence, one is called the direct object and the other one is called the indirect object. So direct object and indirect object. So what is the difference between the direct and indirect objects? What is the main thing that is different in both these things? Let's check that. Vani gave me a handbag. Here Vani gave what? The subject is Vani, verb is the gave. So what did the subject give? What did Vani give? Vani is the subject, gave is the verb, and what did she give? Handbag. So a handbag is the direct object. But to whom did she give? What did she give? The answer for that question is a handbag. So that is the direct object. To whom did she give? She gave it to me. So me is the indirect object. So if there are two objects in a sentence, definitely the first object will be direct object and the second object will be indirect object. How to identify whether an object is direct or indirect is by asking questions like that. For example, what did Vani give? A handbag. So handbag is the direct object. To whom did Vani give the handbag? To me. So me is the indirect object. Similarly, in the last sentence, I have written a letter to my teacher. So I is the subject, have written is the verb. So I have written what? I have written what? A letter. So a letter is the direct object. To whom did I write the letter? My teacher. I wrote the letter to my teacher. So my teacher is the indirect object. Okay. So in the above examples, we understood what are subjects, what is a verb, then what are direct object, what is meant by indirect object, and we have one more thing called complement. This predicate is not required. Okay, this third one called predicate, that can be skipped. Okay, predicate is not required for us, it is only for school students. Okay, so first you should know what is a subject, then what are verbs, then what is an object, and in that again we can divide it as direct and indirect object. So verbs are action words. Subject means it can be a noun or pronoun. For example, the name of a person, place or thing about whom or what we are talking in a sentence is the subject. Direct object means the object that directly performs the action. I'm sorry, it is not performs, that directly receives the action. There is a typing mistake here. Okay, just a minute. Direct object is something that directly receives the action. No object can perform an action. Only subjects can perform actions. Objects will only receive action. Okay. So direct objects are those that directly receives the action, and indirect objects are those that indirectly receives the action. Just like in the examples that we discussed. And finally we have one more part called complement. What is meant by a complement? A word that gives additional meaning to the subject. A word that gives additional meaning to the subject is called a complement. For example, in the fifth sentence, Shweta is an artist. Here, Shweta is the subject, is the verb, and I called this an artist as object. But instead of writing this as an object, we can call it as a complement, because I am describing the girl called Shweta to be an artist. I am qualifying her or I am modifying her to be an artist. So an artist is better to be called a complement rather than calling it an object. An artist is a complement. It is object only, but it is better to call it as a complement. Similarly, the fourth sentence, the tiger is the national animal of India. Here, the national animal of India is actually a description that I am giving to tiger, right? I am actually qualifying the animal called tiger. So instead of calling it as an object, we can rather call it the complement of the sentence, because it is describing the animal called the tiger. Similarly, if I say peacock is the national bird of India, so the national bird of India will be describing the bird called peacock. So that particular designation is called complement. Complement means a describing word or a credit that I am giving to something. Okay, describing word, or it's an additional meaning that I am giving to the subject. Okay, so now this is what we have checked. In the first sentence, Vani gave me a handbag. Here subject is Vani, verb is gave, direct object is handbag, and indirect object is me. In the second sentence, subject is Disha, verb is loves, direct object is flowers, indirect object is nil. Nil means there is nothing, nil. Okay. The phone rang. Here the subject is the phone, verb is rang. Then the tiger is the national animal of India. Here the tiger is the subject, verb is, and object or complement, it is the national animal of India. Next, I have written a letter to my teacher. Here subject is I, verb is have written, and object is a letter to my teacher. Here direct object is a letter, indirect object is my teacher. I have not separated it, you can understand that. Okay. Then Shweta is an artist. Here subject is Shweta, verb is, and object or complement is an artist. Now we are going to understand what is a sentence and how the verbs are important in a sentence. A sentence can be basically divided into two parts called subject and predicate. So this predicate is nothing but, maybe for your information you can just understand, whatever comes after the subject is called a predicate, including the noun. Including the verb. Okay. For example, Disha loves flowers. Here Disha is the subject, loves flowers is the predicate. So whatever is written after the subject is called a predicate. That's why I told you it is not important for us. Okay. So generally we divide a subject into two parts, subject and predicate. Later we divide the predicate again into two parts as verb and object. That is how we are getting subject, verb and object. This predicate is again divided into two as verb and object. The predicate contains the verb, direct object and indirect object, or we can simply call it an object. Sometimes we have two objects, sometimes we have only one object. An object is very essential in sentences to make a complete sense. Without the presence of at least one object, a sentence can be never meaningful except a few sentences with subjects and verbs. So generally, if there is no object in a sentence, we cannot write a meaningful sentence, just like a sentence without a verb or subject. But there are few sentences with only subjects and verbs. For example, boys play, birds fly, girls play, women cook, etc. In these sentences, you can see there is only a subject and verb. There are no objects. So there are sentences without objects, but 99% of the sentences will have objects. Without objects, we cannot get a complete meaning. Okay. Similarly, the complement is the fourth sentence part that helped the verb complete its meaning. In the third sentence, we don't need the help of an object. Third sentence was the phone rang. In the third sentence, we don't need the help of an object or a complement to give us a meaningful sentence. It's because we are using an intransitive verb. Okay, just leave that intransitive verb. Just you can understand, rang is a verb that doesn't require an object. And direct object, a direct object is a noun or a pronoun that directly performs the action of the verb in a sentence, or does the action of a verb in a sentence. Indirect object is it's an object that precedes the direct object. That is, it comes before the direct object. Preceding means to come before. It tells us who the verb indirectly affects and who is receiving the direct object. Okay, so these are the basic things now we understood. Okay, and now we are going to study the three types of verbs. The three types of verbs: finite verbs, transitive verbs, and intransitive verbs. This is the important part: finite verbs, transitive verbs, and intransitive verbs. So before learning what is meant by a finite verb or transitive verb or intransitive verb, you must have a clear understanding of what is a verb. So now you understood what is a verb, how it is used, and it is not possible to frame a sentence without a verb, and also even without a subject we cannot form a sentence. But objects are not necessary to form a sentence. Objects are not always compulsory, because there are also sentences without objects. Then we learnt that objects are of two types: direct object and indirect object. Okay, so these are the basic things that you need to understand. Now we are going to check the types of verbs, that is finite verbs, transitive verbs, and intransitive verbs. And you also learned what is a complement. Complement is similar to object, which is a describing part of a sentence. It adds some meaning to the subject, or it describes the subject. Okay, so now let's check what are finite verbs first. What is a finite verb? Verbs that have a definite tense are called finite verbs. I repeat, verbs that have a definite tense are called finite verbs. We know that there are three tenses: past tense, present tense, and future tense. So always verbs change according to the tense of the sentence. For example, I am telling, she eats fruit cake, she ate a fruit cake, and she has eaten a fruit cake. First one is she eats a fruit cake. The second one is she ate a fruit cake. And the third one is she has eaten a fruit cake. Here you can see the first sentence is in present tense because she eats a fruit cake. So eat or eats, that is in present tense. In the second sentence, she ate a fruit cake. Here, ate is in past tense. So the entire sentence is in past tense. And in the third sentence, she has eaten a fruit cake. Here, it is in present perfect tense because I am using the word eaten. So according to the change in the tense, I am changing the form of the verb also. Eat, first it was eats, then it became ate, and then it was changed to eaten. So eat, ate, eaten. So verbs are having three forms. And the three forms are used when tenses are changed from one tense to another tense. If that is the case, then verbs that have a definite tense are called finite verbs. So whichever verbs have a definite tense is like it has a clear tense. It has a proper tense. Such verbs are called finite verbs. They have to agree with their subjects in person and number. So such verbs will always agree with their subjects in person and number. For example, if the subject is singular, the verb will also become singular. If the subject is plural, then the verb will also become plural. For example, I told she eats a fruit cake. She is singular. So eats is also singular. If I told they eats a fruit cake, that is a wrong sentence because they is a plural subject and you cannot use eats. You can only write eat. They eat a fruit cake. So if it is he, she, it or any other singular subject, then the singular form of verb is used. And if the subject is plural like I, you, they, we, etc., such kind of subjects are plural, along with which you will use only plural verbs. Okay. So verbs that have a definite tense and agree with their subjects in person and number are called finite verbs. Examples: gave, loves, rang, is, are, etc. are finite verbs. So here you can see gave. Gave is the past tense of give. The V3 form is given. Give, gave, given. So this word has different forms and it can change according to the tense. It has a definite tense and it also agrees with the subjects. If it is a singular subject, then we write gives. If it is a plural subject, we write only give. Okay, so that is a finite verb. Next is loves. Loves is a finite verb because love, loved, loved. Love, loved, loved. So it can change according to the tense change. It can agree with the subject in number. Okay, next is rang. Ring, rang, rung. Rang is the past tense of ring. So it has a definite tense. It can change according to the change in tense. Also it agrees with the subject. Okay, so this is also a finite verb. Similarly, is and are. As I told you, is and are helping verbs. But still they are also finite verbs because is singular in present tense. Are is plural in present tense. Is a helping verb that is used only with singular subjects in present tense. Are is also used only in present tense but with plural subjects. They are, we are, children are, students are. Okay. So all these are examples for finite verbs. So we have some few more examples. I like chocolates. So this is in present tense. I like chocolates. So like is in present tense. Similarly, the exam was on Sunday. So was is in past tense. Rahul will come tomorrow. So will come. So that is in future tense. If you are using the word will plus any verb, the V1 form of the verb, then that is in future tense. Here the italicized words, that is like, was and come, all these change their forms according to the tense. So any verb that can change its form according to the change in tense are called finite verbs. Clear? Now we can move to transitive and intransitive verbs. So these topics will be really helpful for you when you start communicating. Okay. So what is meant by a transitive verb? Verbs that need objects to complete their meaning are called transitive verbs. I hope you remember that I told you there are sentences which do not require objects to get a complete meaning. Some sentences do not require an object to get a meaning or to form a meaning. Do you remember that? For example, boys play, birds fly, etc. Yes, we have some sentences like that. So similarly, we are going to study some verbs which require object and which don't require objects. So transitive verbs are verbs that need objects to complete their meaning. Transitive verbs are like small children. Without their parents, the children cannot live, right? Small kids cannot live without their parents or some guardian. So transitive verbs are like that. They need objects to complete their meaning. Without objects, these verbs cannot stand. So such verbs are called transitive verbs. So transitive verbs are verbs that need objects to complete their meaning. So we have some examples here. Shyam plays the guitar beautifully. The doctor gave me some medicines. The physician prescribed some tablets to the patient. Here, Shyam plays the guitar beautifully. So the subject is Shyam, the verb is plays, and the object is the guitar, and complement is beautifully. Okay. So here you can see, if I simply write Shyam plays, what does it mean? It means that Shyam is playing in a park or on a ground or somewhere else. So generally play means we think it is a physical action, physical exercise. But here I am telling that he is playing an instrument, a musical instrument. So Shyam, if I simply write Shyam plays, the meaning itself will change. It means that Shyam is playing in the ground or park or beach. But if I complete the sentence using the object, that is the guitar, then the meaning of the sentence completely changes. So now I can understand that, oh, Shyam is playing an instrument. So Shyam plays the guitar beautifully. This is an example to show play is a transitive verb. The verb play or plays is a transitive verb. Because if I simply write play or plays, it means that விளையாடுறது and the meaning. But whereas playing an instrument means to வாசிக்கிறது. It is to use an instrument. Okay. Similarly, the doctor gave me some medicines. If I simply write the doctor gave full stop, does it give any meaning? The doctor gave. So you will have a lot of questions in your mind. What did he give? When did he give? Why did he give? You will have a lot of questions. So what did the doctor give? The doctor gave me some medicines. So without the objects called me and medicines, we cannot complete this sentence. So gave is another transitive verb. So you can see that all these verbs require some objects to complete their meaning. And the last one, the physician prescribed some tablets to the patient. Here, the physician prescribed. Okay, if I simply write the physician prescribed full stop, you will have a question. What did he prescribe? So, you should also find the answer to that question. Some tablets to the patient. So here, without an object, one object or two objects, it is not possible to complete this sentence. So prescribed is also a transitive verb. So here the verbs like place, gave and prescribed need at least one object to give us a meaningful sentence. Without objects, these sentences cannot exist. Clear? If yes, we can move to intransitive verbs. Intransitive verbs are... Yes, okay. So intransitive verbs are quite opposite to transitive verbs. Because these are verbs that do not require an object to complete their meaning. So intransitive verbs don't need any object. Even without object, they can happily stand. They are like grown-up kids. Okay, grown-up children. Small children will need parents. Whereas grown-up children know even if they are having their parents somewhere far, they can survive because some student nowadays school students are going to hostel and they are staying alone with their friends, right? Okay, so transitive verbs are like small kids. Intransitive verbs are like grown-up kids. So verbs that do not require an object to complete their meaning are called intransitive verbs. So for example, the phone rang, the train arrived, the lion roars, birds fly, boys play. So here you can see the phone, the subject, rang. So after rang I am not writing anything else. So there is no object, the sentence is ending with the verb only. Similarly, the train arrived. Okay, it is a meaningful sentence. The train arrived. Train vandachu. So there is no more explanation needed here. If you wish to give some more details, you can give, but it is not necessary. It is not compulsory. The lion roars. Okay, the lion is roaring. That is an action. Birds fly. Okay, that is also a meaningful sentence. Boys play, that's also a meaningful sentence. Here play means literally playing in the ground. Okay, so here you can see that rang, arrived, roads, fly and play. All these verbs don't require an object at all. Such words are called intransitive verbs. Okay, so finally we completed the three types of verbs. We studied what are finite verbs, intransitive verbs and transitive verbs. Now you understood that there are two types of verbs in English. One is called the main verb and the other one is called the helping verb. These main verbs are again divided into three as finite verbs, transitive verbs and intransitive verbs. Okay. Also we discussed some examples only with main verbs. Some sentences are having only helping verbs and some sentences are having both a helping verb and a main verb. So now it is time for you to learn what are helping verbs. So now I am presenting another screen. The 27 auxiliary verbs are helping verbs. Okay. So what is meant by an auxiliary verb? This is the first thing that we have to know. An auxiliary verb is used as a helping verb along with the main verb in a sentence to support its meaning and structure. So auxiliary verbs alias helping verbs are used with the main verb to support its meaning and structure. An auxiliary verb is hence called a helping verb. Auxiliary verbs are used to alter the tense, mood or voice of the sentence. So auxiliary verbs are really powerful because they can change the tense, mood or voice of the sentence. And there are 27 auxiliary verbs in English. Auxiliary verbs never stand alone. They are always present with the main verb. This is also having an exception because theoretically they are telling that auxiliary verbs cannot stand alone. But we saw some sentences with only auxiliary verbs, right? So it means that 99% or 98% of the sentences will have main verb. Maybe 1 or 2% of sentences will have only auxiliary verbs. Okay. So, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, an auxiliary verb is a verb that is used with another main verb to form tenses, negatives and questions, question tags and passive voices. For example, in the sentences, I am listening, are you working, the bill has been paid, you don't like her, do you, etc. Am, are, has been and do are all auxiliary verbs. So instead of looking at this, now you can read this one. I actually want you all to write down this. The 27 auxiliary verbs. These are the 27 auxiliary verbs. Is, am, are, was, were, do, does, did, has, have, had, can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, must, ought to, used to, need to, dare, be, been and being. Very, very important in communication. Auxiliary verbs are 27. It is, am, are, was, were, do, does, did, has, have, had, can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, must, ought to, used to, need to, dare, be, been and be. So you have some tricks to learn these auxiliary verbs. There are some short techniques to learn them. The first 5 verbs, that is, am, are, was and were, they are called B form verbs or B type verbs. B type, okay, B type. B type verbs are is, am, are, was, were. Then do, does, did. They are called do form verbs. Do form verbs. Then has, have, had. They are called have form verbs. So if you divide these 27 verbs into small pieces or into small parts, it will be easy for you to memorize. So is, am, are, was, were. They are B type verbs. Do, does, did are called do type or do form verbs. Has, have, had are called have form verbs. Then it is easy. Can, could, that is a pair. Will, would, that is another pair. Shall, should is another pair. May, might, must, that is a triplet. May, might, must. You can learn that together because all starts with M, 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 right? May, might, must. Next is ought to, used to, need to. This ought to is nothing but it is equal to must. If I say you must go to the office, you can also tell you ought to go to the office. You ought to go to the office. So must and ought to have the same meanings. Then used to is used to show an action, that an habit or an action that you were doing in the past. Some habit or some practice that you had in the past, but it is no more in existence. For example, if you say I used to play cricket, it means you were playing cricket in the past. You used to play cricket in the past, but not now. Now you don't have that practice. Okay? So used to is used to show past habits. Then need to. Need to is used to show some necessity. I need to buy a car. I need to repair my computer. I need to buy a watch. All these are requirements. Then dare. Dare means like how dare you are, how bold you are. Dare is a very rarely used helping verb. Then last comes be, been and being. That can also be studied together. Okay. So is, am, are, was, were, do, does, did, has, have, had, can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, must, ought to, used to, need to, dare, be, been and being. These are the 27 auxiliary verbs. So now we have some examples for each auxiliary verb, which we will discuss in the next class. Okay. Each auxiliary verb is used as a question word here, just like what we discussed in the last class in interrogative sentences. Okay. So this we can read in the next class. Now you can understand that we have given some examples using the first 5 verbs: am, is, are, was and were. So here you can see I am watching the match. I am watching the match. This is in present continuous tense and the subject is singular. I am watching the match. So I is singular. When it comes to this sentence, I is singular. Generally we consider I to be a plural subject, but here I is singular because I am watching the match. So I is singular. This is in present tense. Next is she is having her lunch. This is also in present tense. So am, is and are, these three are used in present tense only. She is having her lunch. This is in present tense, present continuous tense. They are going to Dubai. This is also in present continuous tense, but this is plural because they is plural. They are going to Dubai. Next we are going to past tense. Sita was drinking water. So Sita was drinking water. So this is in past continuous tense, singular only because Sita is singular. Finally, the children were playing cards. So the children is plural, so you are using were. If the subject is singular, you can use is or was depending on the tense. If the subject is plural, then you can use are or were depending on the tense. If it is present tense, you can use is and are, and for past tense you have to use was and were. So the children were playing cards. Here this is also in past continuous tense with the subject plural subject. So similarly we also have more examples using do, does, did and all. Okay, that we will discuss in the next class. And now we are just discussing the types of auxiliary. So auxiliary verbs are again divided into 2 types. That is primary auxiliaries and modal auxiliaries. Primary auxiliary verbs and modal auxiliary verbs. So you can note down this. And what are primary auxiliaries and what are modal auxiliaries? Primary auxiliary means the be verbs, do verbs, have verbs, then be, been and being. That is, all the be type verbs will come, all the do form verbs, do, does, did, and all the have form verbs, that is has, have, had. So totally 5 plus 3, 8, 8 plus 3, 11, 11 plus be, been and being. So 11 plus 3, 14. You will have 14 primary auxiliaries. Primary auxiliaries are 14. Okay, be form, do form, have form, be, been and being. These are primary auxiliaries. And the rest of all the verbs, all the rest of the verbs are modal auxiliaries, starting from can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, must, ought to, used to, need to. Dare will not come in modal also. Okay, dare is neither primary nor modal. It will not come in primary auxiliary or modal auxiliary. So you can just delete that dare. Okay, it is one of the auxiliary verbs, but we don't consider it in either primary or modal. So there are only 12 modal verbs and 14 primary verbs. So 12 plus 12 plus 14 you get 26, plus dare 27. This is how 27 auxiliary verbs are formed. Also you can understand, I told you, no, am, is and are in present tense, was and were in past tense. Similarly, do, does, did. Here you can see do and does are used in present tense, did is used in past tense. Do and does in present tense, did in past tense. Does is used with singular subjects, do is used with plural subjects, and did is used with all subjects, irrespective of whether it is singular or plural. Similarly, has, have, had. Here you can see has and have are in present tense, had is in past tense. Has and have are in present tense, had is in past tense, and has is used with the singular subjects, have is used with the plural subjects, had is used with all the subjects. Then can, past tense is could, will, past tense is would, shall, past tense is should, may, past tense is might, must is must only, there is no past tense or anything for must, ought to, used to, need to, all these will have only one, there is no tense, it's just a word. Okay, ought to, must and all we use it only in future tense. Okay, then used to is in past tense only, we cannot change its tense. Need to is also future tense, I need to go to school, I need to visit my friend, so all these are in future tense. Then be, been and being, they are in present tenses. Okay, so auxiliary verbs are 27. They are again divided into two types, that is primary auxiliaries and modal auxiliaries. So how to use these primary and modal auxiliaries, that we shall discuss in the next class. And along with that we shall also learn one more type of verb, that is regular verb and irregular verb. So in the next class we can have half an hour to discuss these verbs and the remaining half an hour for tenses. Okay, so is it clear? How was the class today? Did you understand? If you're having any doubts, you can post it in the group. Okay. Yeah, you can post it in the group so that I will be answering to each of your doubts.